Wow, today is a day of rolling with the punches, everybody. Thanks so much for coming back and joining us for what is going to be a great fireside chat. What a way to kick off our program today. And thank you, everyone, for your patience and just staying flexible with us. So we're very excited today to welcome our first keynote session, a fireside chat with the president of Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, Jonathan Holloway, as he discusses his vision for the future of the state's flagship institution, being interviewed by the president of AT&T New Jersey, Charlene Brown. Allow me to first introduce Charlene. Charlene Brown is the president of AT&T and an actively engaged NJBIA member and partner, as well as an incredible business champion. As president of AT&T New Jersey, Charlene is responsible for providing the overall strategic direction for AT&T's external relationships in New Jersey. In her capacity as the state advocate for AT&T, she serves as the liaison for the governor's office, the legislature, and the state's business community. She is also responsible for a range of policy issues and manages regulatory matters before the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Further and near and dear to her heart, Charlene also leads social engagement initiatives for AT&T, ensuring alignment with the objectives of AT&T foundations across all of our communities throughout the state. I want to congratulate Charlene on her fast approaching retirement from an incredible career at AT&T and thank her for her great support for NJBIA, our business community, and the local communities that she has served throughout her tenure. This morning, Charlene will be interviewing Jonathan Holloway, a U.S. historian and the 21st president of Rutgers State University, my alma mater, go Scarlet Knights. President Holloway took office on July 1 of this year. He also serves as a university professor and distinguished professor. Prior to accepting the presidency of Rutgers, Dr. Holloway was provost of Northwestern University from 2017 through 2020 and a member of the faculty of Yale University from 1999 through 2017. At Yale, he served as dean of Yale College and the Edmund S. Morgan Professor of African American Studies, History, and American Studies. Let's welcome Charlene and President Holloway. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Michelle. And President Holloway, I just have to tell you, as a Rutgers and Douglas alum, I welcome you to New Jersey and to Rutgers. And I am so proud that you are the first African-American president of Rutgers. So it is a pleasure to be able to interview you today.
Thank you.
So with that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about yourself. And I just wanted to acknowledge that you, when you first came on board, set up a fund for $75,000 to give to students who are in need. And so with that I really would like to commend you for that.
Thank
so
you.
President Holloway, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? What is your favorite football team other than Rutgers? And also, you know, what is your favorite part of New Jersey? What do you like about New Jersey?
Well, those are actually more complicated questions than you would think. First of all, good morning, everybody, and apologies for the late start. I think it was my computer that was causing everything to be turned upside down and around. So thanks for finding a way to join us. You know, my favorite part of New Jersey, if we exclude Rutgers, is yet to be discovered. You know, I was announced in late January as the next president, was planning to visit every other week starting in April to get acclimated as I transitioned, to get to know New Jersey, to get to know our alumni, our constituents, et cetera. And I couldn't make any of those trips. So my first time as president designate being in the state after my introduction was on June 25th when we drove up to the driveway of the president's house. And because of COVID, the university, essentially my cabinet facility manager requested I not come into the office when I first got here, because the more I would come into the office, the more other people would come. And they don't want to have a full building for every reason I don't need to explain to everybody. So I spend most of my time in my home office, which is what you're seeing around here, and have yet to get out to explore the state. I mean, when on there's days when I like want to go out and to find a new place and discover it, but like when I get there, what am I supposed to do? Take out food and eat in my car? So it's been a slow journey into discovering New Jersey. So check back with me in a couple of months. Well, in the spring, I'll be able to tell you all the great places in New Jersey that I've discovered. when that happens, it'll be because I found great food someplace. You know, I discover things by my stomach. So we'll see about that. And if you got great recommendations, please send them to me.
Well, I think a lot of us will send you recommendations. Many of us are New Jerseyans, and so we want to share our state with you.
I can't
So
wait.
with that, I wanted to ask you about your vision for Rutgers, for the State University. Share that with us, some of your thoughts about that.
Sure. So when I was introduced on January 21st, and then on my first day in office on July 1st, and in my university Senate address, my first public address as president in October, I really centered my comments on three things more than anything else. The relentless pursuit of academic excellence. I mean, we are a university after all, and that's meant behind the scenes, really putting academics in the center of the central administration, which seemed like an obvious first step, that it shouldn't have to be a first step, but you know, we had to make that articulated in a very clear way. Then Rutgers is a massive institution, and it is incredibly complex. And I think our complexity gets in the way of our success at times. And so I'm trying to find ways to simplify the structure. And I've created positions for both of these goals that will reflect responsibilities for these people to follow to achieve these goals. And the one goal that I've talked the most about is about establishing a beloved community. In a university as large as Rutgers is, that sounds like a strange ambition. But I talk about a beloved community from the standpoint of we need to respect, acknowledge and respect everybody who's contributing to making Rutgers Rutgers, from the fanciest professor to the dining hall worker and the custodian and the groundskeeper. All of these people are critical for the success of the university. A beloved community is one where we acknowledge that we share more things in common than we don't. So when I talk about a beloved community, I'm not talking about a place where we all agree with one another. That's not what a university is for. I'm talking about a place where we can helpfully disagree with one another, but do so recognizing that we share something in common. And if we can simplify our structure, pursue academics relentlessly, and recognize that we share a lot in common, we'll sort of hyperfuel Rutgers to move up in its rankings. And my goal at the end of the day is to make Michigan and Berkeley, the top two public universities in the country, uncomfortable when they know that Rutgers is part of a conversation about recruiting a faculty member, getting a student. Michigan is already nervous about playing us in football now. We know that much. We should have beaten them. But the fact is, Rutgers deserves to be recognized for being one of the great public Ivies, and one of, as the phrase is, you know, being the Berkeley, Michigan, Wisconsin, Virginia. It needs to be in that same conversation. It's close to it. My goal is to get us there.
Well, thank you. You talked a little bit earlier about the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic on you personally, but can you elaborate a little bit more on how you see that impacting Rutgers in terms of, you know, the university itself addressing the pandemic? I know Rutgers was one of the first to come out with a test. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the test. I mean, what an amazing moment for Rutgers and for the nation and the world by having this test created that is still being used all over this country. It was a real marker of the kind of excellence in our academic and research enterprise that is just part of what Rutgers is. On a less happy note, the pandemic has had a horrible effect on the university. And not just from individuals' personal lives and the risk of or going through a health crisis or losing family members, financially it's been devastating. So we have, simply because of the financial turmoil that COVID has caused, and we've seen it reflected in the state's cut of our fourth quarter appropriation, which was restored, but our revenue streams have been really hit extremely hard. And so we're looking at a 9-figure deficit in this current fiscal year, and trying to find ways to bring it down to just being an 8-figure deficit is one of our biggest challenges right now. So, you know, sadly, we've had to lay off a lot of people, although we're beginning to hire them back. We're still pursuing furloughs and wage freezes. I took a 10% salary cut on my first day on the job. So we've got a lot of work to do to dig out of this financial hole. I'm sure we'll get there, but it's just going to take us some time.
Toward that end, many institutions, including Rutgers, have students suffering from food insecurity. This issue is, I guess, likely to be exacerbated by the downturn included by the coronavirus. John Bon Jovi had opened up a restaurant called Soul Kitchen at Newark. Have you considered duplicating that in either New Brunswick or Camden?
Something like Soul Kitchen?
Yes.
Specifically, I think it'd be a marvelous opportunity. In New Brunswick, we do have 2 food pantries on the campus that have been in great demand. I confess I don't know the situation in Camden. This is part of my being a brand new president and still trying to learn many things all at once. But we would love to have that kind of partnership with someone who's able to bring in the capital to get it up and running. I think it's a marvelous idea. I've heard only rave reviews about Soul Kitchen and the Bon Jovi's generosity in getting it started.
Thank you. Okay, so state leaders have been discussing the need for skilling and reskilling New Jersey's workforce. What do you see as Rutgers' role in terms of this whole workforce development initiative?
Well, I think our role is quite critical. I mean, Rutgers is a massive institution. 100,000 people are sort of operating under the Rutgers banner, and it's all over the state. And we're fortunate to have a number of corporate relationships that are really turning our shared attention to this, and specifically our relationship with Prudential, based up in Newark, that I was on the phone with their leadership team late last week, or I guess, I'm sorry, just before Thanksgiving, about this very issue. And we all share the interest in finding ways to make sure that Rutgers graduates have the skills that are needed to translate into these different, in this case, corporate spaces, but could be many different types of spaces. And as Prudential identifies areas where its own staff needs to upskill, that we could be a partner through a remote learning platform or something like that, where we can provide training, certificates, et cetera. So this is something that we really want to participate in quite enthusiastically. And coming out of COVID, we should be able to do this more often because we were forced to go remote in 2 weeks' time, which is a stunning achievement given the size and complexity of Rutgers. And so we need to learn from, what we need to develop expertise out of what we learned from that process, so that we can provide more online platform opportunities for full-time workers, maybe do nighttime classes or just online modules. So I think there's lots of opportunity for Rutgers to partner with private entities across the state in this regard.
Well, since I'm with AT&T, I'm going to ask you the question in terms of how are you preparing the students for STEM, for jobs in the future?
Well, that's, it's a strange thing perhaps to hear. The president doesn't get involved in that literal kind of detail.
No, I understand that.
but no, my chief academic officer is a chemical engineer. And so he's very dedicated to making sure that we are becoming more and more robust in the STEM space to support students in exactly the way that AT&T would need. So this is an absolute commitment on our end. And it's a commitment that was there before, but we want to make sure we increase it and intensify it in every way that we can.
The governor's administration is recreating an innovation ecosystem, and this is a big initiative of NJBIA as well. What role do you see Rutgers playing in this innovation ecosystem here in the Garden State?
Well, multiple roles. When I first met the governor and the senior team was, I think, a few days after I was given the job and about a week before I was publicly announced. And in that meeting, he talked about the innovation, the investment in an innovation economy, and specifically was talking about the hub down in New Brunswick. Now, this was not that we knew that COVID was already among us, but this was mid-January, so we didn't know what was about to hit. And so I was fully on board with Rutgers being a key partner in helping to co-develop the hub and becoming a major tenant, an anchor tenant for that innovation, entrepreneurial space in downtown New Brunswick, where there's currently a big hole in the ground. Well, COVID arrived and shut all of that stuff down. Now, about 2 weeks ago, I joined the governor, the president of Tel Aviv University, who's another key partner, and leaders from Princeton and leaders from private sector to do a virtual restart of the hub project. And it will be transformative, not just for New Brunswick, not just for Rutgers, for the state of New Jersey. I mean, this will be I think it's I can't remember how many tens of thousands square foot space with maker spaces, wet and dry labs, hoteling spaces, all the kind of mixed use things you'd want to have to bring innovators, entrepreneurs, business people, researchers to be in close proximity so we can sort of hyper fuel the frequency of interactions and get new ideas started and then put them into the New Jersey economy. And that's really seen as a Kickstarter for really adding a lot more opportunities along the Route 1 corridor for innovation and entrepreneurship. So that's one major way that Rutgers hopes to be a key figure in this enterprise that the governor is launching. We're fully on board.
Great, great. I'm going to change the subject a little bit. Have you examined the number of students who attend Rutgers, but not you personally, but your staff, but who do not graduate or disproportionately take more than 4 years to finish school? And a lot of these students graduate with a lot of debt. Do you have a strategy to increase the number of students who earn degrees within 4 years?
It's a real challenge throughout higher ed. And it's something that actually recently our enrollment management team in New Brunswick, which is not the whole university, but it's the largest piece of it, shared with me their strategies about how to address differences in graduation rates. Now, the fact is, New Brunswick has a 6-year graduation rate, which is what the standard metric is across higher ed. It's 6 years, it's not 4, although the goal is 4. A 6-year graduation rate that is quite admirable. It's over 80%. It needs to be higher, but that's still very good, especially for a state school. However, you see real differences across gender lines and across race lines in terms of the 4-year graduation rate particularly. Things start to catch up and even out at 6 years, but 4 years, you see real differences. And so the enrollment management team has really developed a series of projects aimed at getting people in and out of the door in 4 years. Now, part of the challenge there is that, as I mentioned before, Rutgers is so complicated, sometimes it's difficult to get access to the kinds of classes you need on a timely basis. So we need to make it easier for our own students to navigate the university to lower the barriers to graduate in 4 years. So we're really committed to this as a project. We don't want our students loading up on debt unnecessarily just so they can complete a degree. But we do want them to get that degree. I mean, that's the game changer, absolutely.
Okay. Toward that end, Rutgers is considered one of the most diverse universities in the nation. Yet statistics tell us that there are still minority groups who are underrepresented. Have you had a chance to examine those numbers? And if so, what will you do to ensure access and equity for all individuals?
Yeah. So you're very right that Rutgers is incredibly diverse, but its diversity is not equally expressed. So if we think of Rutgers, people often think of New Brunswick as Rutgers, but that's not Rutgers. Rutgers is New Brunswick, Camden, Newark. It's the biomedical health system that integrated 8 years ago. It's all of those things is Rutgers. So Rutgers will make declarations, and this is when I was a job candidate, and I actually raised this during my interview, perhaps recklessly, that Rutgers was very good about touting its diversity, which is quite remarkable. But if you drill down a little bit, you start to recognize that Newark is incredibly diverse, Camden, super diverse, New Brunswick, diverse, but not in equitable ways, and really quite lagging specifically when it comes to African-American representation. I mean, we should look like the state university. We're not there yet. Now, we do admit populations, but they are going other places. So we need to find ways to make it clear to our applicant pool that no matter what part of Rutgers you're interested in, it is your place. And one of the things that helps us along that way is, you mentioned earlier this during the introduction, that I'd set up a fund to help out people from low income or challenged circumstances. It's actually, I just donated, my wife and I donated $75,000 to a large fund that already exists at Rutgers called the Scarlet Promise Grant Fund, which specifically is there for low income, high risk students, which disproportionately would be Black and brown students, to help them gain access to Rutgers or stay in Rutgers if they're reaching an emergency situation. And I've started a fund, a fundraising drive to secure $10 million to help support those students. So that's one way in which that we are trying to ease the entrance to Rutgers, ease the ability to stay at Rutgers, with a real focus on making sure we are accessible and equitable and inclusive, no matter where you are in terms of how Rutgers is expressing itself.
Okay, thank you. In your opinion, how important is collaboration between government, academia, and industry in addressing, a whole array of topics?
Oh, it's critical. I mean, it's absolutely critical. Higher ed is often guilty, I will confess, I'm a creature of higher ed, of considering itself like at a remove from society, at a remove from the messiness of politics, because we have tenure, we can do these different things. I mean, higher ed is a different kind of beast, but it's not so precious that it can afford to divorce itself from the political machinery of the state. I mean, the state is our largest benefactor still, and I'd like it to be an even more significant benefactor, of course. But the university has to be connected to its local communities. And we've seen this, Nancy Cantor in particular, be advocating Rutgers Newark as an anchor community for Newark, anchor institution for Newark. I think wherever Rutgers is an anchor institution for that physical space. It needs to be a good partner to local politicians and movers and shakers. It needs to be a great partner to private industry, because these are people going to hire our students or work with our researchers in laboratory settings. So we need to be the best partner possible. The government, I hope, sees us as one of the major economic drivers, positive drivers in the state. And I want to make sure industry sees us that way as well. So we all need to be working together, if for no other reason than enlightened self-interest, to increase the strength of New Jersey's economy and its place in the nation.
Well, speaking of New Jersey's economy, I'm going to go back to the pandemic and the coronavirus, given the impact of the COVID-19 on small businesses. And I know that Rutgers is a part of either, whether it's Camden, Newark, or New Brunswick. What role are you, or do you envision, if any, that Rutgers can play, maybe helping small businesses get back to some type of economic stability?
It's a really important question. One of the things that it very soon after starting at Rutgers was created a new position, Senior Vice President for Equity, for the entire university. And one of her programs, one of the initiatives under her large umbrella, is to look at the ways in which Rutgers is being a good partner for local vendors in the way that you're suggesting, being there for local businesses. Nancy Cantor up in Newark has been really out front on this issue throughout her tenure as chancellor, in terms of looking at university contracts to make sure where we can, we are hiring locally and using local vendors. So that's a practice that I want to see that we're pursuing throughout the university system. And we're a major buyer, and to the extent that we can, we should be making sure to support our local economy. Absolutely.
Okay. What are you doing to, I guess, really encourage students to get involved in the community? I mean, I know right now with COVID, once again, you're really not able to do that. Your hands are tied. but what is your long-term vision to encourage kind of students to get involved in the community?
One of the things I believe in deeply is civic engagement and civic education. And this for me is not a political position in terms of being left, right, or center. It's just about being a good citizen. And especially at a state university, I think we have the obligation, not just by our mandate to be a good citizen of the state, but I think morally and ethically, we need to be good citizens to our communities, however that's going to be expressed. So for me, there will be many opportunities, some of which have already happened, have passed, and I've spoken out on them, about encouraging our students and our faculty and staff to get engaged in the electoral process in terms of just registering to vote and getting out to vote. Again, not about a political position, but about being a good citizen. Rutgers, I just received a video last night from Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs in New Brunswick about Rutgers volunteerism with students despite COVID. Well, in light of COVID and despite it, that we had, I think it was over 500 student volunteers. This is just New Brunswick, going out to the community, either literally or virtually, and helping out during a recent community service campaign. We need to do as much of that as possible. It is, not only is it good for local businesses, local communities, local people in need, it's good for the individual, and it's part of being a good citizen, frankly. And I think if more of us did just a little bit, just a little thing, the change that we'd see would be enormous throughout our society. So to me, this is something that should be built into the practice of being a student, a staff, or a faculty member at Rutgers, is giving back in some ways and being engaged in some ways. So I'll be talking about that
when you talk
when
about
those opportunities present themselves.
Okay, I think that's really, one of the things as students grow and learn to be involved in the community is certainly a great attribute. A little bit kind of along those lines, what about student internships? How important are student internships in terms of the development, educational development of your students? And how would you like to see, if any, of that change or grow or stay the same? Are you comfortable with that?
Well, again, as a new president, I don't know the extent or the size of our internship programs or affiliations, but I can safely say I want them to grow. Safely can say that. Internships are an incredible way for students to learn the habits and practices of workforces. Many of our students have been working for a long time, certainly, and they're working while they're in college, but many of them haven't, or many of them simply have been interning or working at a position that reflects where they might be ending up at high enough internship for an executive for a company, or working in a lab or something like that. These are incredible opportunities for our students, and I think incredible opportunities for the businesses or nonprofits who want to hire these interns or appoint these interns, because you'd get really smart, energetic, and engaged young people who want to make a difference in the world. So the more we can have internship possibilities and affiliations, it's a win-win for everybody as far as I'm concerned. And I really think will help, speaking of Rutgers specifically, will help our students understand the things that will be expected of them when they go out into the workforce. That there are certain ways of being in the workforce that students, because of their youth, simply don't know yet. They haven't had those experiences yet. And for some, this will be a pretty intense wake-up call. Like, oh, we've got to show up at this particular time, dressed in a particular way, and with a particular kind of attitude every single day. I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's going to work. That's showing up and making a difference. So I think there's a lot to be gained by the students in these internships as well. I'm all for them. I'd love to see more and more and more.
Great. So now, as the president of Rutgers, I know it's been a difficult time. So this is probably a very unfair question, but I'll say that ahead of time. You've been here for, I don't know how many months now, but what do you see? Okay.
Oh, 5 months.
What would you, what 5? So what would you like to see? What are some of the changes you would like to see at Rutgers, if any? And how do you work with your entire academic group to make some of those things happen, or how do you envision working with them to make some of those things happen?
Well, it's a totally reasonable question. The challenge for me is not so much that I've only been here 5 months, is that I've been here 5 months on an empty campus. So I don't know what Rutgers feels like on a daily basis in New Brunswick, with 35,000 undergrads and another 20,000 grad students sort of in the mix. I don't know what even feels like to walk down campus mall to interact with people, because no one is here. So it's hard for me to answer that question in that regard. However, there are things that I do know I'd love to see improved. And in fact, I spoke about this in my University Synod address. I mean, Rutgers, I knew before I arrived, and I've certainly seen it since then, has a really strained history when it comes to labor management relationships. The relationship has been strained. And there's responsibility for that on both sides of the equation. Now, Rutgers management had signed contracts with most of its unions. There's 22 of them, had signed contracts just in the last year or two, but then COVID hit, and that turned everything upside down. And since 2/3 of our operating budget, a $4.5 billion annual budget, is payroll, and we're facing a massive deficit, the only way to close that gap at the end of the day, it was to freeze salary increases that were mandated by the contracts that we had signed, and to start having conversations about furloughs in order to frankly reduce layoffs and to try to keep our head above water, or get it close to the surface at least. And understandably, unions were really upset about this because they just signed contracts. So that's been a really difficult situation to walk into. I get the concerns on both sides of the equation. Unfortunately, there's such a history of such a strained relationship trying to get both sides to agree in good faith on a way forward has been very difficult. And a lot of distrust and mistrust, again, on both sides. So that's been the most difficult thing. I would love to find a way for management to demonstrate that it hears labor's calls. And I would love to find a way for labor to hear management's side of the argument as well. And right now we just aren't there. That's going to be a work in progress for a good while. And it's very painful given the financial turmoil that everybody's going through right now. So there's no easy answer there, but that's the thing I'd love to see different. That would make a huge difference in everybody's life in a positive way if we can actually improve that relationship.
I want to go back to something. I want to go back to the pandemic and something you mentioned earlier, that students are not on campus, and so how do you feel the virtual kind of experience is going? And are you getting complaints, or is it seem to be, moving ahead, forging ahead?
It's, I have a college-age daughter at a different university, and I hear complaints about that virtual experience as well. So I know students are challenged, as are faculty, trying to navigate forward in this space. It is hard. There's no doubt about it. So I've certainly heard from students about, and parents at times, about their frustrations with whether it's, well, so many different aspects of the remote learning experience. It's far from perfect. I mean, one of the critiques that and goodness, there was a petition that had like 25,000 signatures on it, that given the fact students understood why we went to remote, but given that fact, they should not be charged full tuition. I get it. It's a logical conclusion to come to. The fact of the matter is that we can't change the laws of arithmetic, that Rutgers is tuition dependent. And if we reduce their tuition, I think they wanted a 20% cut in tuition. that would be the size of the hit is jaw-dropping. $250 million hit to the university's bottom line. We simply can't, we'd have to lay off 4,000 more people to accommodate the cut in tuition. And I can't do that. So that's one of the toughest aspects that is built into the reality of our online world. And we're hoping that in the spring semester, we can have more people in person, more classes in person, although it won't be a tremendous increase. And but I am confident we'll be fully back in place for fall semester 2021. And so most of the challenges of this remote world will be in our rearview mirror at that point.
And then we can have our basketball and our football again as well.
In person, yes. Yes.
In person, exactly.
Yeah.
With that, we have about 15 more minutes, so I'm going to open it up to questions from participants. If any participants have questions that they would like to ask. Well, I don't hear anything right now, or I can't see it. I'm not sure.
They may be muted. They may not be able to ask the questions because of this.
Oh, they may not be able to ask questions. I thought they could write the questions.
Oh, in the chat, maybe.
In the chat. But if not, tell me a little bit about the sports aspect of Rutgers. Have you been able to engage at all in terms of
You know, it's interesting. I talked about not being able to, not having a sense of what Rutgers feels like on a daily basis. And part of that, I just don't see people, don't see students. Well, the president's house is next door to the football practice fields, actually. And so heading into our first home game, Coach Shiano invited me over to talk to the players. And for me, that was a thrill, not just because I was talking to athletes who just won their first Big Ten game in 3 years, and we're feeling very positive. And the change in the team from last year to this year is just remarkable. We are really, frankly, 2 plays away from being a 4-2 team instead of being a 2-4 team. But when I spoke to the football players, it was thrilling. It was I'd yet to see that many students at the same time, at once, live. So that was just exciting just to see people. Look, football has really turned a corner, it seems. Still a rebuilding year, of course, but Shiano's team doesn't quit. And that, from what I'm told, is a major change from past years. And the offense is a real force. I mean, throwing up lots of points. So that's exciting to see. And I think many more W's are in the future for there. Meanwhile, men's and women's basketball, my goodness, they are just impressive. Capital I, impressive. I don't ever like to see, I feel for losing teams and they lose by, a mountain of points, but the fact that women's team was up by 50 in the closing minutes against Monmouth was exciting for me, for Rutgers, to see the team looking like in mid-season shape and relentless in their defense. It was just really quite impressive. And the men's team, I was able to see 2 of their 3 games. They just seem really complete. I mean, yeah, we lost our star point guard for a little bit with a sprained ankle and Geo Baker. But even without him there, they have really done well in beating some quality opponents too. So I think there's lots to be excited about on that front. And I can't wait to get to know more Rutgers sports, because I know we have a lot of excellent teams and coaches in different spaces.
Well, I have a question from the audience, and it's a great question in terms of what is Rutgers doing in terms of, mental health or substance abuse?
It's a very important question.
I know, yes.
Yeah, in fact, last night I've started a new advisory committee of students for me, President Student Advisory Committee. And that was the topic of last night's conversation. So it's an hour with one of the lead people in that space for Rutgers New Brunswick. And look, it's a challenge. I don't know any institution that has fully meeting the needs of mental health at every given moment during the cycle of a year. At a university, those needs go through certain kind of rhythm, that the demand for mental health spikes during exam periods, for instance, or for seniors in the second semester, it's very stressful as we're looking to walk out of the university. So there are certain rhythms in the university that we are mindful of, but we can't hire somebody for a month and then let them go. That's not practical. So it's about managing demand across space. The good news for us is that being mindful of all the stressors happening in our society this year, not just the virus, but politics, racial reckoning, finances, you name it. We did not, and this is a decision that predated me, but I was glad to see it, did not cut back on mental health resources, even though we went remote. So there's still a high demand. The demand has been more manageable right now because telehealth is becoming more and more frequently used, people are more comfortable with it. So we're doing better in that regard. But we do know this is a really challenging space. And part of it is about trying to find ways to educate our own students about the resources that are available to them. Staff and faculty have a little bit greater access to things because they can get in the car, let's say, and go to a provider who might be off campus, whereas for students that's more difficult. But we're really aware of the challenges and really doing everything we can to meet the need. With that, I mean, and with the goal of keeping everybody safe. But it is exquisitely difficult. There's no doubt about it.
So I'm going to kind of, another questions came in from Princeton University. They're looking forward to opportunities to expand research partners. Where are you in terms of working with other universities in terms of that whole issue of, partnering in terms of research?
Princeton? What school is that? Never heard of it. No, I'm very friendly with their president, Chris Eisgruber, and it's an astonishing institution. Well, I mentioned earlier the hub, the innovation space that the governor was really behind. Princeton is a major player in that space as well. And while that is not Rutgers leading it, 'cause that's the public-private partnership, that will be an opportunity for Rutgers and Princeton to collaborate in research spaces. And I know collaboration already happens, especially in STEM spaces between the two universities. I'm all for collaboration, and certainly, especially in the STEM spaces where equipment is extraordinarily expensive, finding ways to share material resources is across universities is frankly smart. When I was at Northwestern last academic year, Northwestern and Chicago, which were much further apart than Princeton and Rutgers are close to each other, they actually shared laboratory space on a number of technical areas because buying two of the same piece of equipment just didn't make sense. So to me, that's just a logical way of proceeding forward. And I can't tell you to the extent to which it happens already. I mean, I know it happens. I can't tell you like the extent of it, but increasing the opportunities for partnership, all for it, absolutely. Great.
Well, we're going to wrap up, and I want to say we appreciate your spending the time with the business community and kind of giving us insight in terms of your vision for Rutgers. What are some of the parting thoughts you want to leave with our business community, our business leaders?
Well, first, again, apologies for all the technical things that happened. I think my computer was the source of the challenges. Thank you for attending. But for me, we've already touched upon the most important thing is that Rutgers wants to be a collaborator, wants to be a good citizen. And we know as an institution, we will not be able to realize our ambitions without working in coherent and cohesive manners with business, whether it's small vendors, small business vendors near our universities, whether it's major corporate research labs running up and down Route 1, and anything in between. We need to work with New Jersey business in order to realize, to become our best version of ourselves. And I think that we have incredible value added opportunities for the business sector as well, whether it's the human capital of really smart students and faculty, whether it's through the public-private partnerships based in labs that we have or that they have that we can, do work together in that space, or whether it's just through the sheer commitment, shared commitment to do well by the state of New Jersey. I think that there's a lot to be gained in being good citizens for the state, working through public-private partnerships.
Well, I want to thank you. I mean, your answers were just both candid and frank and open. And so I want to say on behalf of the business community, we want to thank you for doing this. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Michelle.
Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you so much. What an incredible discussion between two awesome presidents, the president of AT&T New Jersey and the president of Rutgers University. I want to thank you both. It was a stimulating discussion. The vision is extraordinary. The transparency and the dialogue is fantastic. President Holloway, again, I said, as an alum, Rutgers is in very good hands. And as a business community, particularly for NJBIA, we're at the heart of collaboration on workforce development and skill building. And we look forward to many, many years of continued partnership as we advance the workforce and skill set of our future workers here in the state of New Jersey. So thank you for your vision. Charlene, thank you so much for your great interview today. We wish you both the best, and we want to thank you again and everyone who's participated. And now to our audience, I'd like to remind you that at 10:15 comes our next live event, which is the Pundits panel. Again, you can click onto the link to the right of your screen, and that will take you directly to the event. So everyone continue to enjoy a great day. And once again, President Holloway and Charlene, thank you for a wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you again, President Holloway. It was nice speaking with you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.